Well, welcome everybody. We are now recording, as you probably just heard. And I want to talk tonight. I wanted to make these like 10-minute lectures, pretty short, but then we'll go on to answer questions that you may have and we'll record them. But I do want to talk about one topic each week. And this topic, really, we are at a crossroads. The idea is you have all of us non-pro athletes have about 80 to 90 minutes of running or run walking or walking at a heart rate that is just a little above, a little elevated beyond marathon race pace, higher than, faster than marathon race pace. Um, I don't like to use the word faster, but higher heart rate, because if you're going up a hill, you may be slower and your heart rate may be up. It's all about heart rate. So if your heart rate, what we call like lactate threshold, where you're really starting to skyrocket lactic acid output. But at any rate, the average non-pro athlete has about 80, 90 minutes at that level. So figure it takes a couple minutes, maybe 10 minutes or so, before from when you start till your heart rate gets up to what we call lactate threshold, a little higher than marathon race pace. Question is what is marathon race pace for you? Well, what is lactate threshold? Well, one really good way to define marathon race pace, or you're going too fast for marathon race pace in this case, is that 80 to 90 minute rule. Give it like 10 minutes for your heart rate to get up there, and after about, say, 100 minutes, that's where we really start to see people falling off the back of these groups because they're going too fast and they're in the wrong group. Now, understand something, and that's that I do see a fair amount of people, normally in faster groups, but even with walk groups and run walk groups and slower groups, where their anaerobic threshold, because they're training way too fast, too much, is way up there. So they can go that 80, 90 minutes, with no problem. And they can keep up with the group. People say to me, well, I could keep up with the group. It's not about keeping up with the group. It's about building endurance at low heart rate, which I'm going to get into in a minute. So after about 100 minutes, that's where we see people falling off the back of their groups. And that's where you need to realize those people are in the wrong group to build aerobic endurance, right? They may be in a good group. They could keep up with that group at high heart rate for like 80, 90 minutes, because their anaerobic threshold is way up there because they've been training at high heart rate too much for too long. That's a different story. Actually, I should pull up I was thinking about pulling up a graph. But this is really now the moment of truth, where all groups are over 80 to 90 minutes. You're going 13 or 14 miles Saturday. Group 0 through 4 are going 14 miles. Everyone else is going 13. And so you're all well over 100 minutes or an hour and 40 minutes. The thing is you really need to do your Saturday low heart rate training at low heart rate in a group that is easy, like the pace says. The pace on the schedules says easy pace, and it's because it needs to be easy. Pretty simple. That's why we use that term. It needs to feel really comfortable. Now, here's another caveat to this. If you're training to build endurance, meaning more capillary veins and arteries, more mitochondria, more oxidative enzymes, basically developing your fat burning system, right? We've talked about this before. If you missed that, you could go back to previous lectures on this that are all recorded on our YouTube or on our Facebook LA Roadrunner dash group Facebook site. You just scroll way, way, way down. You'll find a lecture on aerobic versus anaerobic. But um, you do want to build that aerobic. You use more fat at lower heart rate, right? So if you're at lower heart rate, you're training that fat burning system, that lower heart rate system. You're always burning some glycogen, but you want to build that fat burning system because fat is a much bigger reservoir for fuel than glycogen, which comes from carbohydrate. That's what you gain from the fast work is the glycogen training, glycolic training. Anyway, so here's the key. If you're falling off the back of the group, well, for one thing, you're going to do that during the marathon, so that's a given. And the other thing is you're going too fast for your aerobic training. You may be able to keep up even with faster groups on high heart rate threshold runs, you know, because of your threshold is higher, but your aerobic zone may be low. And you really need to focus on that aerobic fat burning zone. The other thing is, in order to develop more of that fat burning zone, we want your body to utilize fat more than carbohydrate. And if you're taking in a million gels and a million carbs during training right now, you're training your body to use carbs more efficiently, not fat, right? So I would prefer, except for like the slower runners that are out there for, let's face it, if you're sitting still for 3 or 4 hours, you're probably need to eat something. You probably need to take in some kind of calories. And your stomach cannot take in that much solid calories. So we go with these liquid sport drinks and we go with gels that have more carbohydrate. I get it. If you're out there and you're getting hungry after like 2.5, 3 hours or something, and you need to take in something, I get it. You're not going to be able to, have a burger and fries. That'll make you sick. And so drink and thin gels are probably the easier way to go. Fine. But if you can avoid taking in carbohydrate and stick to just keeping it slow, you don't usually need to eat while you're sitting there. You have enough fat to get you through an entire marathon at low heart rate, right? Just make sure you're in a group that's low enough heart rate that you can get through it all, so you don't really need a gel until you're at like 3 something hours, which some of you are. I understand that. Walkers and run walkers, no question. But for the rest of you, try and avoid gels at least for the first like 2 hours or so, unless you're going into that like 3 4 hour range, and then you can start taking gels earlier as well, just to get it in your system. But if you can avoid taking in gels, all the better. You're training your body to utilize fat more efficiently. I leave you with this last idea, and I'm not going to bother with my spreadsheet or whatever, but I leave you with this final idea, and that's that a former coach who actually won the New York Marathon many years ago, I want to say it was like 83, a guy named Rod Dixon, used to say, train your training and race your races, but do not race your training. Just because you can keep a faster pace like marathon race pace for a longer period of time does not mean you're benefiting from it. Make sure, one, that your group is going at that range of pace you're supposed to be going at and not faster, like most of groups 0 through 4 are doing, more like marathon race pace as opposed to they need to be a minute to minute and a half slower. Run walk, you're right in the middle of your race pace, so that's a little different. And walk, you're actually a little faster than your marathon race pace. So in 2 weeks, we are meeting at Dodger Stadium lot of hills. So I'm going to have everybody do marathon race pace, whatever that is, walk, and run. And if you're really losing your, keep in mind, walk will actually be slower than where your training paces are. Um, Run walk will be, like I said, you're in the middle already, and run will be a minute to a minute and a half faster, depending on the group. Especially group 0 through 4 will be that much more, even a little more maybe. Um, so that'll really be a litmus test as to where you are and what group you need to be in, because you really, really don't want to burn out toward the end of your marathon because you haven't developed these physiological adaptations which occur from aerobic low heart rate training that we do Saturdays for long periods of time. That really is critical. And also, your heart rate is going higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. If you don't start out low enough, you're going to get so high that you're no longer going to be utilizing fat as a resource. You're now going to be in the glycolic region. You're anaerobic. Your heart rate is so high. Those are the people who are thinking to themselves, when is this run going to be over? You're really pushing yourself. Oh, but I kept up with the group the whole way. You may have killed yourself to do it. You may have totally wasted your time by your heart rate being too high a big chunk of the time, and you need to lower your heart rate from the beginning. But I leave that to all of you. These are tests and things to think about that are really, really important for your training for a marathon, so you don't burn out and have suddenly to walk either because you've run out of glycogen or really lower on glycogen, or because you just don't have the physiological adaptations to utilize fat efficiently as a resource for fuel. So I leave you with all of that. That is some serious tests, litmus tests for, are you in the right group? The 80-90 minute rule. I'll tell you one last story. I was a pace leader many years ago, and for about 9 years with the Roadrunners, and one of my earlier years, I want to say like year 4 or something, I was with group 5, I think. At any rate, I'm running down the alleyway through Venice, what is it, Speedway, and I'm halfway down the alleyway. I see this big macho guy with tattoos. He could pick me up and throw me across the alleyway. One of these tough guys. And he's walking. And our group runs right by him. Happened to be at the back of the group. I wasn't leading. So I slowed down and stopped and walked with him. I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yeah," just like that. I'll never forget this. And he was like near tears, this guy. I really felt sorry for him, this tough guy. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Oh, no, nothing." And I said, "No, it's okay. You can tell me." I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Well, I just don't think I can do this." I said, "What, you mean the marathon?" He said, "Yeah, I just don't think I'm cut out for it." I said, well, what happened?" He said, I get to this point and suddenly I just have to walk. It's not that I can't. I keep trying to push myself farther and farther and harder and harder, and I can't do it." And I said, here's a story. And I filled him in about 2 minutes on heart rate and glycogen. It's a narrow, limited reservoir of glycogen, and if you lower your heart rate, you're using more fat. I said, all you got to do is go like 1 or 2 more groups slower, and you'll be great. Well, more of the story. He finished the marathon. He did great. He moved to a slower pace group, and he built those physiological, manifestations that create what we call endurance. And guy did fine, and that's what more of us need to do. We have an epidemic of people who really want to motivate themselves. They're extremely motivated, and I love that. Where else in the world do you find that? People who are too motivated, but that over motivation, can actually cause you to do things that aren't as beneficial for you. And this is a great point right here tonight, where I'm going to stop and repeat, train your training, race your races, but do not race your training. With that, I thank you all. And if any of you have any questions, we are still going to record this, but that is my entire lecture for this evening. Let me pull up. Oh, my mouse battery just died. Let me pull up the chat bar as soon as I can find it. There we are. Whoops. There we are. Okay. Let's see. Anything left on the chat? No. Does anyone have any questions regarding any of that before we move on to just general questions? All you need to do is, you probably see my cursor going across my face here. Just scroll your cursor across your page. The little command bar will come up either on the bottom or the top of your screen. There's a little mute button that looks like an old-fashioned kind of microphone, and that's probably got a red line through it. Just click on that and you'll be able to talk. Or click on the chat button and you'll be able to type something in the chat bar. And I don't see any chats. Any questions just on that specific topic before we go to general questions? Going once? Going twice? Anybody? Okay, I throw it up to general questions. Anyone, any general questions about anything? And
did you say we're going race pace at Dodger Stadium?
Yes, that was my wife just asked a question. If you didn't hear it, that is a new thing that you are hearing here first for the first time. Our pace leaders, I don't think, have even heard this one. At Dodger Stadium, I am going to ask everyone to go race pace, whatever that is. Keep in mind, like, walkers are actually going to be slower than what your training pace is. But everyone else will either be run, walk, kind of in the middle, and runners, you're going to be way faster. Minute and a half faster.
On the hills?
Even with the hills. You go up the hills a little slower, you go down the hills a little faster. And yes, my wife just said, "You're trying to kill us?" And yeah, absolutely. Or at least get you in the right group that's appropriate for you, because keep in mind, it's not just going to be 6 miles of race pace, but on race day, it's 26.2 miles at race pace with bigger hills in the first 6 miles of the LA Marathon than what we're going to encounter in the 2 loops around Dodger Stadium there. So yeah, absolutely. This is the big test to see if you're in the right group, as well as a good run on a taper week. Dan, recommendations on energy gels or salt tabs, etc., for half marathon training or race? They will have sport drink out on the half marathon, the Rose Bowl half, just as they will for the LA Marathon. Same drink, and I forgot the name of it, but at any rate, we will have a sport drink out there. It may change. That's a small possibility, but it will not be new as it was last year, I don't think. But for gels, it's really trial and error. I highly recommend, we're going to have goo, and we will have that. I'm going to try and pick some up tomorrow. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to. But the week after, I'll have a bunch of gels that will, I think we're using goo this year. We got a deal with them last heard, and that's a very, very recent thing. And so that will be on the course in 2 locations at the marathon, not the half, but gels are really a trial and error for everybody. We will have, like I said, goo on our training, because that's going to be our official gel. But for people who have sensitive stomachs with gels or blocks or any one of those little tiny things, anything that we runners take in, I recommend also baby food. It doesn't have the sodium, unfortunately. You'd need to take in mineral pills, especially on a hot day. Although I recommend mineral pills for everyone on a hot day, which is the next thing you asked me about, salt tabs. But Baby food can work great for people with sensitive stomachs. It's real food. You absorb more of it as a carbohydrate. I think I've done both the gels. I like the thinner gels as opposed to the thicker gels. Thinner gels would be like Hammer Nutrition makes kind of a thinner gel. There are a couple others on the market. I hear, I've never tried it. I hear Morton, it makes a thinner liquid kind of gel. Um, but at any rate, it's really huge trial and error. And anyone with real upset stomach that can also do even, test out baby food. Some people can't do that. It's mulched fruit, I recommend it. The real food is generally easier to absorb than processed food, which is what gels are, processed carbohydrate, processed sugars. They use maltodextrin, which is a processed sugar. It's a form of glucose and fructose combination, which is what fruit is, but fruit is 2 parts glucose, 1 part fructose, where gels are more fructose because you can absorb it quicker. So a lot of people can't do fructose as easily. Even though you can absorb it quicker. At any rate, salt tabs. What we're talking about, mineral pills. You do want sodium. You also want potassium and magnesium. And, I do know people that will go to McDonald's and rip off a bunch of salt packets and they'll just open it and take down the whole salt packet, which just sounds
Don't do
absolutely
that.
ghastly.
Don't
And
rip off salt
my wife is saying don't do that. One, don't steal from McDonald's. Two, don't eat McDonald's. But also three, that's just not a really good way to absorb sodium. Um, the salt tablets have the sodium is I forgot the name, but it's so much more ground up and powdered, and I can't think of the name of it. But at any rate, the process. But buffered, it's much more buffered, so it's not going to like attack your mouth like real salt from a salt shaker or McDonald's packet would, you know. But at any rate, um, yeah, you can get. I recommend Salt Stick. Salt Stick. Just go to saltstick.com or go to any running store. You'll find one of these, I'm sure. Salt Stick. Or I also like Hammer Nutrition. Think Hammer Out the Miles. They make an endurance mineral formula called Enduralights. So electrolytes are the minerals that your body uses, like sodium, magnesium, potassium. Endurance and electrolytes, Enduralights from Hammer Nutrition. Go to hammer.com, you can get them. Or again, one or the other will be at almost any running shop. Any bike shop would have it, a triathlon store. All of those would have usually one or the other of those. Those are really good mineral pills. I recommend them both. Salt Stick and Enduralights. So there you go. As a matter of fact, I can probably type it out on a whiteboard if I can find my whiteboard. But here we go. Would be, whoops. Oh, here is my email for anyone who needs my email. And let me add to that if I can. And I'm not having any luck here. Well, anyway, that's my email. Salt Stick and Enduralights. Oh, here we go. Whoops. Salt Stick and Enduralights. That's what I'd recommend for mineral pills. At any rate, thank you for sharing. My only regret is not having joined sooner because I had been training every area of the marathon the wrong way. Oh, Mel, thank you very much for your comment. I'm sorry you didn't join us sooner in the year, but hey, you know something? There's always next year as well, and we're thrilled to have you now. Does anyone have any other questions while I'm trying to type out and failing miserably to type in salt stick on this whiteboard? Well, anyway, salt stick and Endurolites from Salt Stick and from uh, Hammer Nutrition. Oh, here it is. Salt Stick and Hammer Nutrition Endurolites. Something like that. Hang on, let's stretch that out a little. Whoops, what the hell is that? Well, anyway, there you go. There are the two. I hope you can read that. They're pretty small. But anyway, Salt Stick and Hammer Nutrition makes Endurolites. So, anybody other questions on the chat or even just a verbal question? Anything that anyone has to ask? Anything at all? I will tell you one thing before we turn this off or someone has a question. Our schedule is a little screwed up. We at the McCourt Foundation, we own the parking lot outside that circles around Dodger Stadium, which is where and kind of why the LA Marathon begins in the parking lot right around outside Dodger Stadium. Unfortunately, we have an agreement with Dodger Stadium that when they need to, they get to use their parking lot. So we have this coming week on your schedules, it does say taper week. And it is much less, it's about 40+%, depending on your schedule. It's about 40 to 50% lower volume through the entire week. Well, the problem is a week from 2 days from now, a week from Saturday, we were going to go to Dodger Stadium. Unfortunately, they have an event there, so we couldn't just take up the entire parking lot just for our what we might consider a small group for the size of the parking lot when they're going to be using the whole parking lot. So we had to push our Dodger Stadium event back to December 17th. And so we're pushing our taper week back a week to match the 6 or 7 miles of the taper week with Dodger Stadium, because we're going to go 6-7 miles at Dodger Stadium. So what we're going to ask all of you to do is flip, not this week, but next week, which is a taper week, flip that with the week after. So next week is that build week of 14 to 15 miles, and then the week after is actually the taper week, which would have been next week. And I'll explain that during, the morning before we all leave. It may be a little complicated and confusing for a lot of you guys, but I do apologize. But then the next build cycle, which is normally 3 weeks build and 1 week taper, we'll only have 2-week build and then a week of taper. So everything will go back to normal after Dodger Stadium. I hope that makes sense. And anyway, I'm going to close out this whiteboard. And that really won't affect anybody's training. It's just a matter of flipping the 2 weeks, the build week with the taper week. So we'll be in line with going to Dodger Stadium. And you'll benefit that taper day will be in line with your taper week that got shoved back a week. So that's all. So the week after this, we're going 14 or 15 miles, not 6 or 7 like the schedule says. We're flipping the entire week, the 2 entire weeks, not just the days. So does anybody have, whoops, let me do that. There we go. Does anybody have any other questions, be it in the chat or on verbally? Going once, going twice, going 3 times.
A question.
Oh yeah, somebody in the
The
11th
damn again.
hour.
One question I had was about, where depending on your group and what your comfort pace is, um, uh, not that I want to go up in speed, but I'm curious how people do that, or if you just expect that, if this is your comfort speed, that's just what your comfort speed is for the future. I'm just curious if people make drastic moves up, how that happens or works.
Great. So you're talking about when do I move up and how do I know it's the right thing to do?
Yeah, like me, I kind of get that impression. Like you kind of get like a general sense for like one jump. I'd like a refresher on that. But I'm curious if people make multiple, jumps over time, if that's normal over a period of time as well.
I've seen people go the whole gambit, just faster, 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 faster groups over time. What I recommend is, probably the safest way to do it. I mean, you can go to a faster group. If you see a group coming back that's faster and you're going out, you can jump in the middle of a workout and run with them. And if it doesn't work out, stop and wait for your group to catch up again. I mean, there is that even. But, the problem with jumping to a faster group on a build week is that you're increasing your intensity and you're increasing the volume that you're going at. So your energy output for that week is suddenly jumping way up more than 10%. So you have an increased risk of injury. That's the only thing about that is an increased risk of injury and jumping up on a build week, jumping to a faster group. Um, but throughout a season, I've seen people jump to several different groups. That's not uncommon. Um, Pardon me, especially for beginners, because beginners, you're at zero, and from 0 to 20%, you're going to jump, skyrocket. That from 30 to 40, 50 to 60, you have diminishing returns. When you're at like 80 to 90 or 90 to 100, you're not increasing that much as you are from like 0 to 10 or 20% of your, when you're a couch potato, you're increasing your ability dramatically. Those are the people who are going to jump from group to group to group very quickly, or the quicker, as they get stronger, depending on their individual ability to regenerate hormones and things. I won't explain that. To rebuild muscle tissue quickly. Um, Meaning young people are going to jump to groups faster than much, much older people. But I recommend testing a group during a taper week because your volume is going to be way down. So what the heck if your intensity is a little higher? Your overall energy output will still be lower overall. And in fact, for that reason, it's okay for all of us to do a little more speed work. And in fact, most of our schedules show that a little more speed work does appear if you look at your percentages on taper weeks, um, because you've dropped like 40 to 50% in volume, you know. But that would be a really good time to test the water. Like Dodger Stadium. For one, you're going at marathon race pace, and two, the volume for the week and even the day is like half. You will have just completed a 14, 13 miler, and or 14, 15 miler. In this case, it was supposed to be 13, 14. Anyway, um, and you're only doing a 6 or 7 miler. You're doing half. Um, that would be a really good time to test the waters for can you go to a faster group? That Dodger Stadium would be a really good time to do it, to try it out. Um, you'll have it had a week of taper, so you'll be a little stronger when you hit Dodger Stadium, or at least 5 days of taper before you hit Dodger Stadium. And that would be a really good time to do it. But you could do it any week. Just be careful not to get injured, and A lot of all of these groups overlap each other in their training range, right? So even on a build week, you know, it's tough to say. I don't want to get you guys injured and say, oh, sure, go for it. Um, but there again, if you find yourself burning out after like 100 minutes, definitely wrong group for Saturdays. And keep in mind, you're burning out after 100 minutes if it's a run group. I'm not talking about run, walk, or walk here for a moment, but if it's a run group, your training paces are way slower than your marathon race pace. So marathon race day, you're in trouble and you haven't even gotten there yet. So be really careful before you jump up in a group or faster to a group. I don't want to say up and down, that makes no sense, but to a faster or slower group. Did that answer it?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I think that was Dan. Dan, thank you very much. I appreciate that question. Good question, especially in line with tonight's topic. So, anybody else? Any other questions before we call it quits and turn off the recording and whatever? And going once, going twice, going 3 times. I'm going to turn off the recording. I will be here online in case anyone has any other questions. For those watching this replay at home, thank you for watching. For those who are doing it live, I will still be on even though we stopped the recording, which ends now. Thanks to you watching the recording. Bye.